I'm trying to be more aware of why I do the things that I do, and I can't stop. Yeah. And it's weird because I'm out like outside my body at that point, just looking in. Oh no. But it's like
the scene in Interstellar when he goes back and he sees himself.
Like, no. Don't let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave.
Hey everybody, I'm Enoch.
And I'm Isaac.
You're listening to the What About Therapy podcast, where we talk about the what and the why behind all things therapy. And today we're talking about habits, particularly habits for the English 11 class in PG High.
Yeah, they have the best teacher too, I heard over there, Mrs. Fossum. You guys really lucked out. We love you, Mom.
Love you, Mom.
But we hope that this podcast can shed a little bit of light on habits, how like what the benefits are, how they form, and what we can do to develop better habits. And we know that this is also Mrs. Fossum's class is reading Atomic Habits.
Or going to be.
I don't
know if, yeah.
Hopefully they are, because it's a great book. So we would recommend that to anyone out there listening. This isn't sponsored, but, you know.
Have you read it?
Yeah. Well, most of it, actually. I'll challenge myself to finish it as well.
Yeah, I haven't read all of it. I've read some. Seen, like, excerpts from it.
It's solid, though.
Yeah. Quick tip. Go to ChatGPT and just have it summarize in 10 points the entire book.
You don't tell students how to use ChatGPT.
No, I'm not saying don't read the book, just summarize it instead. I'm saying to get a better understanding of the book, you can read it and have ChatGPT summarize the whole thing in bullet points.
That's good. You read it still. Read it still.
Now, if you just don't read the book, then you're just lazy. You hear?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So, and that probably shows you don't have a habit of doing your homework or a habit of reading. So let's talk about that.
That's right. Speaking of habits of reading, actually, I'm trying to get into more habits of reading, and I've been replacing my scrolling more with reading. I know we kind of talked about this on the last episode, you know? But I'm integrating another habit. You want to hear it?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So my goal this year is to read 30 books, right? 30 books mainly that are just fantasy books, just for fun. But I'm like, well, I want to read more like therapy books and like stuff like that.
Self-help.
Like, kind of like self-help, books that'll help me in the field. And so my other habit is this. I'm going to be reading fantasy books for an hour a day. And then I'm going to be reading my self-help therapy books for 30 minutes a day. And so I want to finish one self-help book a week.
Whoa.
And then I'm going to read that book again the next week. And so read it twice in 2 weeks to get the most out of it.
Wow. Okay.
There you go.
Challenge accepted. I got to step up my game. I'm like, I'll do 10 throughout the entire year. Got to find more time to read.
Yeah. So technically I'll read 25 self-help books, but I'll read them twice. Yeah. So about 50.
Well, take that as a challenge, you all.
See if you can beat me.
See if you can do more. If you could, that's super impressive.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's just jump into it.
All right. Yep, we're jumping into habits. So first we're going to talk about kind of some of the benefits of habits, and then we're going to go into how to create your own habit and just have a discussion about that. So first of all, the brain loves habits, and it's designed to keep you alive by not expending a whole lot of energy. Because the brain thinks that the less energy you expend, the longer you can live, and the brain wants you to live forever. Okay, that's what the brain thinks. And so how does it do this? Habits. It helps you automate your life, really. And so a lot of us tend to go through life kind of on autopilot. It's kind of weird. Like, have you ever been driving down the street and you get home, and then when you do get home, you look back and think, I do not remember a single thing about this drive.
It's so scary, like a road trip, and all of a sudden you realize you don't have a memory of the past 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's like driving home on laughing gas.
Yeah, you kind of grip your wheel a little tighter, and you're like, oh, wake up. But it's more of like a habit. Maybe you weren't tired, but it's just a habit. You've done it so many times.
Right.
That's super common for people that commute a lot as well for their job, like every single day, same drive.
Yeah.
Because it helps your brain just expend less energy. And there are benefits to this, great benefits, emotional benefits. It can help create stability and give you a sense of control in your life. So your brain loves habits, and it makes your life a lot easier. There's also a downside to it, like we talked about. Like, you can build negative habits as well, and those sometimes become hard to break because your brain has kind of just gone on autopilot. Like, But being aware of those, that there are benefits and there are also negatives to it, is super important if we want to learn how to adjust those and create new ones.
Yeah. So an example of 2 habits would be, 1, the habit of opening social media and starting your doom scroll, right? There are times when I've been scrolling where I notice that I'm scrolling and I can't stop.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
It's weird. It's like I have no control over what's happening right now, and it's not benefiting me in any way, except maybe seeing some crazy memes,
But you don't even remember a lot of the memes either.
Right.
Like, it's interesting because I'll be scrolling and it's the same thing because I'm trying to be more aware of why I do the things that I do, and I can't stop.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I'm outside my body at that point, just looking in. Oh no. But it's like
it's like the scene in Interstellar when he goes back and he sees himself.
Like, no. Don't let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave.
Yeah, it's like that. So that's one habit, right? That's not very helpful for your life. Now, another habit is reading instead of scrolling on social media. You get way more out of it, even if it's a fantasy book. There's a thing called 75 Hard. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. I think it's kind of dumb. But in 75 Hard, they ask you to read 10 pages a day of a self-help book. And I think reading fantasy books can also be helpful because it's been proven that when you do read fantasy books, it actually increases your capability or your capacity to have empathy for another person.
That's interesting.
Because you learn and read about all these different people. And when you're reading a story, like in Brandon Sanderson, and something happens, and you feel bad for that person, right? Because in a sense, you've kind of become that person as you're reading about them, and you feel bad. That's empathy. You're able to experience what they're experiencing. Kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a great way to actually get healthy emotion out of something besides just a bunch of mini dopamine hits that you get from your phone.
Right.
It's more long-term in a way.
Yeah.
And it's also important to note that habits can take a long time to develop. And I know for me, oftentimes it takes longer than I would like it to.
Yeah.
Anywhere between like 18 to, what was it? You said like 254.
254 days.
254 days.
Yeah.
It could take that long to build a habit. So when you are trying to develop a new habit, give yourself some patience and realize that it's going to take some time.
Right.
So just because you are starting a new habit doesn't mean that you won't fall into your old habits here and there. Like, it's inevitable within those 18 to 254 days. It's just how you react to that habit, the negative habit, that helps you continue to grow your new habit you're trying to develop. And so it takes time. So give yourself a little bit of patience. I usually don't. For myself,
Yeah.
I just want one day to wake up and be like, I'm going to the gym every single day for the rest of my life. And then I go for like 2 days and then I'm like, never mind. I'm so tired.
Yeah.
And just, I think part of it too is slowly working up to that point, and also just giving yourself patience, allowing yourself to develop that mindset. And it takes time.
Right. We were growing up in a world where, especially you guys in high school, RN, trying to use some cool acronyms like that. But especially nowadays, we are growing up in a world where we want to get like the get rich quick scheme, know? And so we need to learn how to develop a habit in 30 days or less. Like, sure, it's possible, because the lower end of the spectrum is within 18 days you can create a habit. But on the opposite end, it almost takes a full year to create a habit of doing something every single day. And so if you're at 90 days and this guru you've been listening to on YouTube says you should have the habit by now at 90 days, that's just not true. They're not, science doesn't back that up. And so like Isaac was saying, just have some grace for yourself and have a little bit of patience. You don't have to be this insane habit builder dude who has all the best habits in the world by next week.
Right.
Like, it's okay. Even if it takes you more than 254 days. Right? Like, if you're an outlier, that's okay. But doing something every single day eventually will become a habit. We do know that.
Yeah. And it kind of goes along with like giving yourself grace with, this is more of an extreme example, I guess, but with like addicts. I've talked to a lot of addicts, and we talk about how relapse is inevitable. So like you can't just decide one day that all of a sudden I'm done, I'm cold turkey. Some people can, and that's crazy awesome.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it is something that is just going to happen, and it's how you react to that relapse that helps you do better next time, and that helps you continue to learn instead of falling down into like the spiral of negative feelings and going right back to the way you were. And so it's the same thing with habits. Sometimes we can create new habits or try to, and then we fall into our bad habits and we instantly think, I have made no progress and it doesn't even matter. Like it's kind of the all or nothing mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. So think about this. We're going to talk about habits in the brain and kind of what happens within the brain when you do create a habit. Okay. So think about an old house. Okay. Maybe it's white, maybe it's brown, but the paint on the outside is chipping. Okay. We're in a wooden house. We're not in a brick house. Even if it's a brick house, if there's paint over the brick, all right?
Oh, that's a bad idea, by the way. It ruins the brick.
Hey,
just saying.
A lot of people do it, especially in the Midwest. But yeah, don't do it. But we're in a wooden house. Okay, we're in Minecraft. It's made of planks. And the paint is starting to chip away. Okay? So if you've ever painted a house, you don't try and chip off all the old paint before you put on new paint. Generally, you get your new paint and you just start painting over it, right? And you put however many layers it takes to completely cover the old paint, and you only see this new paint. So your brain works in a similar way. When you create a habit, we are forming what we call new neural pathways. Now, it's not new as in it forms its own pathway. Like the pathway is already there in your brain, okay? Your brain already has all of the pathways that it's ever going to have. The difference in this analogy is you are simply covering your pathways you currently have with new paint, right? And so however long it takes for you to completely cover that, it could take from that 18 to 254 days to cover and create that new neural pathway. Now, that's important to know because even if you created this new pathway, and especially when it comes to things like addictions, but for habits in this case, you may fall back into old habits even after years of not engaging in that behavior. And that's because that old paint or that old neural pathway is still there. You're not getting rid of it. You're just covering it with new habits. And so keep that in mind. You may have the desire or the urge to go back to old habits even years later, and that's because it's still there. And so you have to learn how to cope with that rather than expecting it to just disappear, because it's not going to happen.
Right. And that's not how it works. Like, like I said, going back to anyone who struggles with really bad habits or even addiction, like that doesn't just disappear. One day you don't just decide to go to therapy and all of a sudden you come out a new man. Like,
oh, I'm a new man.
I'm a new man. I have no more urge to do that thing. It's important to remember that that's still going to be there, and that's something that you will deal with. And it's something that you can deal with in positive ways through good habits. And going along with the house analogy too, there is a part of repainting houses. As Enoch was talking, I remembered when a house is chipping, there is another step before you paint it, and it's going over, it's kind of chipping off the paint that's like really bad, or maybe sanding some parts.
Like all the bumpy parts?
All the bumpy parts, trying to get it so that it's like primed and ready to go. And I think that we could relate that to observing our bad habits, being able to go around and like address the things that we would need to paint over, the things we need to change. 'Cause it's a long process at times. And so I really love the house analogy.
Yeah.
It really puts it into perspective because it's still the house, it's still there. Talking with a therapist at one point, he told me, like, I want you to know that this is something you're going to deal with your entire life. Yeah. And it's not something I could just snap my fingers and take away, but it's something that we can learn to deal with and something that you can focus less on. Yeah. Because a lot of the time when we have bad habits, like 98% of our focus is on that habit, and the 2% is left for whatever else we're doing in life, instead of just kind of learning to focus less on that, and it kind of becomes less and less of an issue. Yeah.
And what happens over the years when you leave the house to be and you don't upkeep it? the paint starts to chip away, right? And so same thing with your habits, same thing with everything you do in life when you want to make any changes, is you need to continually paint over the house every now and again. Do things that help reinforce what you're trying to keep. Because if you just leave it, if you make a change and you're like, all right, it's now a habit, I'm now going to just leave it alone. Eventually, that new paint is going to chip away and you're going to start seeing the older stuff.
Or it can be replaced by other stuff that you just don't want. Right. Like other bad habits or other habits that you just don't want right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we also talk about like the cycle that our brain goes through when it has a habit, and how we can like disrupt that pattern for negative habits. So it's cue, craving, response, reward.
And I think this is actually in the book.
Yeah.
Too, that you guys are going to learn about.
Yeah. And so, for example, let's say we talk a lot about social media because I think it's really applicable to today, and everyone kind of knows what we're talking about. So the cue would be like boredom, like you're just kind of sitting there doing nothing. FOMO.
Fear of missing out.
And then the craving is, okay, I'm just going to sit here and scroll my phone because it gives me little dopamine releases and it's better than just sitting here. And your response in the end would be scrolling.
Get on social media.
And then the reward is little dopamine hits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how our brain goes through habits. So that's also for positive and negative habits. But when you can see what was the cue and then what's the craving, and you can kind of start to understand why you're doing what you're doing, that's the first step to any sort of self-reflection or just development in ways that you want.
Yeah, so that's how you can break those habits, is understanding the cue, craving, response, and reward that you're going through. But this is also a great tool in creating new habits as well. Create your own cues. For example, if you go to the bathroom, that's cue to bring a book and to read. That's what I'm starting to do. When I'm on the Porta-John, I'm on the golden throne. What do they call it these days?
I don't know. The toilet?
I scroll on my phone, and I've been trying to replace that habit with bringing a book and reading instead. That's my cue. And then over time, my craving has been like just getting further along in the story and understanding what comes next. You got to read good books, or it's going to be lame.
Yeah.
And so understand that, and then reward yourself after with like. Maybe you can reward yourself with social media. 5 minutes of social media. Now, if you're a habitual Instagram scroller, maybe rewarding yourself with the drug is not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do things like that. Or reward yourself with 10 minutes of Clash of Clans, or whatever.
Not possible. One sitting is 1 hour. I think it's interesting too that you've kind of said that now your reward is kind of just reading the book. Yeah. The reward kind of becomes what you're doing. It becomes the response. Yeah. They kind of become intertwined. Mm-hmm. So like same thing with social media. As you're swiping, you're getting the reward as well. And you can also create a good habit where, I'm just really interested in this book now, and my reward is I get further in this book.
Yeah.
And so that's also, I think it's so important to understand cues. Like your body gives you cues. So Enoch's example of using the bathroom, like that's a cue that we all face a couple times a day, hopefully, unless you have like bowel problems.
If you've been to the bathroom in a couple days, go see a doctor.
But it's important that you understand, okay, so here's my cue, and what my habit is right now is I go and I sit on the toilet with my phone. Because that's where I think a lot of people, like, have you ever tried sitting in the bathroom without anything?
Absolutely boring.
It just feels like it's horrible.
You actually go to the bathroom on time in a quick manner.
I know, it's weird. It's also really healthy. I think it's great. I've been trying to keep my phone out of the bathroom with me because I know it's just not, it's not a habit I want to have, really. I want to allow myself to just disconnect for a sec.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've tried to develop as a habit. I try to give myself more free time, more time to just disconnect and ground myself.
Yeah. Now, what's important to know when you want to form a habit is you need to align your values with your habits. So for me, I have a value of knowledge. I want to learn more, to be able to just really become a more effective tool in my job. okay, as a future therapist, I want to be able to help as many people as I can. And the best way to do that is to simply know more, right? And know different tools, know different ways of helping people. And so I do that by reading and by learning new things through these self-help or through these books about therapy models and stuff like that.
And you could add like going to school.
Yeah.
So like getting the habit of just going to school, just getting up and
Right.
going, you can create just a response where it's just what you do. You just get up and you go to school. Even if you're having a hard day, you get up and go.
Right.
Because that's just what you do. That's the habit.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, because even if the habit is something that sucks, like school, school's not always fun. Let's be real. If you align that habit or align that action with your value, you find your values in that, it can be a lot easier for you. So if you have a hard time waking up going to school, then maybe change your perspective, change your view on school itself. What do you value? Do you value learning more or becoming smarter? Whatever it is, find your value in that realm and then align those actions with your values. And you're going to be a lot more likely to actually follow through with those habits and with those actions that you want to make habits when they align with who you want to become.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how forming habits around your values, that's a positive habit.
Yeah.
So before you start habits, you need to understand like what your values are in life.
Right.
So for me, I value family a lot. And sometimes I get caught up in a lot of good things like education and work and things that are helping me develop a future that I forget about that value. Mm-hmm. It's still there, but I just don't have a habit around it. And so I'm trying to get in the habit of, okay, I'm going to spend this much time every week with my family, or I'm going to spend this day with my family. And it just kind of becomes a habit of, oh, today is my day where I go spend with my family.
Yeah.
And I've just started developing that just as I've reflected on what I value in life, what really matters and what is kind of just minuscule in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think it's also important that we just make sure we're integrating these habits in our daily life, especially positive habits that reflect your values, and realizing that there's always room for improvement, because we're going to make mistakes and we're going to have ups and downs. And then as we finally uncover a bad habit and replace it over like a year, you're going to find other habits that you want to change. And it's just a continuous cycle through life. So I don't think there's going to be a point where it's like, I only have good habits and none of my habits are bad.
Yeah.
I think it's just continuous improvement and developing your habits and really refining them throughout your life.
Yep. And so if you are working on a habit, remember, be patient with yourself. It can take up to 18 to 254 days. That's a lot. This get-rich-quick scheme, 90-day habits. Yeah, those don't really exist.
Sometimes they do, though.
Sometimes they do. And if it does, great.
Not for me.
Yeah, if it doesn't, that's okay. Keep going.
And we hope you also create the habit of listening in once a week to our What About Therapy
true.
podcast. It is, we are trying to be more consistent on our weekly uploads, so get in the habit of tuning in.
Tuesdays. In the morning. Yep. You know what's weird is the best time to post a podcast is at 3 a.m. on Tuesday. So that's when we post. So you can set your alarms for 3 a.m. on Tuesdays. Tune in early.
That's
be
what
the
I
first
do.
one to listen.
I listen to it 2 times speed, so I get done before anyone else would too.
Yep. There you go. You're done by 3:10 a.m.
We hope you all join us next time on the What About Therapy podcast. And Danny D, take us out.
What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? Yeah. What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? Yeah. What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? Yeah.